Hello, everybody. My name's Kyle Benaz. I'm the marketing manager at Netreo. I'm also joined by Andy Markowitz, our technical product manager, and Alex Ulbrich, CTO of Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions. Today, we'll be discussing our Microsoft 365 Insight product and some enhancements we've made to the module in the last few months, and those are now available to our customers. So on the agenda today, we'll first go into a small bit of background on the subject area and discuss some of the challenges we've heard about from our customers and others in terms of getting visibility into the Microsoft 365 productivity suite. Next, we'll dig into the specifics of the product and walk through the primary features. After that, we'll give Alex the reins and have him walk through a real-world example of the Microsoft 365 Insight module in action. We've earmarked time at the end of this presentation for some Q&A. However, we like to keep things interactive. So if you do have any questions, please click the raise your hand icon or enter your questions in the Go to Webinar Control panel, and we'll take them as they come up. So with that, let me turn things over to Andy. The virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Kyle. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may happen to be signed in from. Thank you for joining us. I'm quite excited to run through this presentation with you today and share the details, the enhancements to the product, right? You know, we've been working on an updated version of this for the last little bit, and it's neat to see it installed and up and running and with customers and obviously in our lab and stuff. Now, in the interest of brevity, I'm going to make the assumption that everybody attending today has at least a cursory knowledge of what the Netreo IT management solution is and what it does. However, for those of you who are new to Netreo, again, thank you very much for your time. And secondly, at the conclusion of this session, please let us know if you'd like additional information, and one of our AEs will get in touch with you. All right, so first we'll go into a tiny bit of background here. Now, unless you've been living under a gigantic rock since, I don't know, the mid-1990s, you're probably aware of who Microsoft is, and unless you've been living under a slightly smaller rock for the last 5 or 6 years, you're also aware of what Microsoft 365 is. Now, for the uninitiated, Microsoft 365, it's a line of subscription services that allow use of Microsoft's Office software suite and other tools like Exchange and SharePoint and Skype, you know, among others. Now, according to the data analysis firm Statista, as of October 2020, Microsoft had a 41% share of the online office productivity market. So as you might expect, in addition to the other facets of their business, right, the company is no slouch in this area either. Now, given that kind of market share, Microsoft doesn't need us for free advertising. Everybody knows who they are, right? However, if you ask them, you know, they'll tell you subscribe to their services in this manner makes nothing but sense. They'll say the platform's more secure, more reliable, compatibility with other systems will be better, right, than installing and maintaining your own versions of the software. Now, whether or not it's better to run your Office suite, email, and application hosting in your infrastructure or rent it from Microsoft, I suppose that can be up for debate, you know, a conversation for another day. However, a 40% market share, right, that's nothing to sneeze at, right? Chances are, right, if you haven't encountered Microsoft 365 in your environment now, right, you will at some point in the future. Now, better or not, right, there are some things that Microsoft isn't going to tell you, right? When you have direct control over the core applications that are crucial to your organization, or when you don't have direct control, let me say that a little better. When you don't have direct control, right, you also don't have the visibility to fix problems when they pop up. So, you know, what are the challenges to getting visibility into a Microsoft 365 tenant? There's actually a few of them. Now, when you choose 365 as your solution provider, or any SaaS application for that matter, you're effectively paying for the privilege of having somebody else manage your applications for you, right? Now, one of the inherent weaknesses in this scenario is that by default, you're really not going to be able to track end-to-end performance of the hosted application, right? That application is essentially a black box from the perspective of your network and your infrastructure. So when a user calls and complains about an application being slow or, you know, not up, right? How do you know where the problem really is? Sure, your vendor is going to give you SLA guarantees, but without a, pardon the pun, window into their infrastructure, right? How can you be sure they're living up to their promises? Now, it's also not in Microsoft's best interest to tell you when you're spending more money than you need to, right? It'd be nice if they had a big banner message on the top of their login portal that said, hey, by the way, you've only activated 60% of the licenses you purchased from us. Give us a call and we'll issue you a refund, right? However, in the words of the boss I had during high school, nice is for rainbows and puppy dogs. This is the real world. And there you have it, right? We're in the real world. Yes, license consumption data is available through the API that Microsoft publishes for their services, right? And there's also dashboards that you can create to find that information through a tool like Power BI. However, it isn't necessarily straightforward or easy to do either. Now, the next challenge is actually an offshoot of the idea I just mentioned, right? API integration into your existing tools also isn't easy. While it is certainly possible to use the documentation Microsoft provides, the question IT leadership, right, IT leaders need to answer is how much is your technical personnel's time worth, right? I mean, in other words, right, if you opt to use Microsoft tools, the choice is between two less than ideal consequences, right? You either take valuable engineering resources to handle customization, integration, and support internally, or you simply use the Microsoft Service Health dashboard. The Service Health dashboard is a really good resource. However, it probably, unless you're running a 100% Microsoft environment, it probably isn't integrated with the rest of your monitoring tools, right? Therefore, additional inefficiencies will be introduced to your IT operational processes, right? If your NOC people and your engineers have to jump from one console to another simply to get a big picture view of your IT landscape. Now, obviously SaaS providers monitor their own infrastructure, and Microsoft is no exception. I mean, given the size and criticality of Microsoft's assumed customer base, it would be foolish to think they don't know down to the second everything that's going on in their infrastructure. However, therein lies the rub. It's their infrastructure. They don't have any idea what's going on with the IT resources you have to manage. However, your customers and users don't particularly care about that distinction, right? I mean, to Wally in the accounting department who just needs to send a message to somebody in purchasing, email is email is email. He doesn't care what system it's on, it just has to work. Now, if you're relying on something like the Service Health dashboard to tell you things are working, that view is only going to be from Microsoft's perspective, not from the perspective of your users on your network. Okay, so given the size of the Microsoft 365 customer base and the visibility challenges I just talked about, something has to give, right? So, enter Netreo's Microsoft 365 Insight module. This new package, right? This module gives your IT organization complete visibility into the Microsoft 365 Productivity Suite, and there's three primary components to the Insight add-on. So the first is response times to each of the major services that are part of the 365 suite, right? Now this checks and displays the response time from your network, right, from your Netreo deployment to the Microsoft cloud. Now the next thing is synthetic checks to Exchange Online to test email flow and performance, right? And then the third piece is not only do you have checks from your core Netreo deployment, but also from any endpoint where a Netreo agent is active as well. So, we've discussed, what Microsoft 365 Insight is, but it's also important to examine, right, what are the benefits it can bring to your monitoring strategy, right? Insight's going to help you drive efficiency among your IT engineers because it's going to save them time from a tool consolidation point of view, right? If they no longer have to use multiple tools to view the status of IT components they're responsible for, right, then that's a win, right? Now, as we alluded to before, yes, the engineering team could roll their own solutions utilizing the Microsoft API, but again, that begs the question, right? Is that the best use of your technical staff's time, right? Shouldn't they be maintaining and managing your IT resources rather than maintaining tools used to monitor those resources? Now, it's also going to help you manage your IT spend, right? Now, this benefit should be fairly self-explanatory. Microsoft 365 isn't inexpensive for an organization to deploy. I mean, after all, customers are basically paying for the privilege to have somebody else host and maintain mission-critical applications. From an IT leadership perspective, it's imperative to make sure a company's utilizing what's paying for, right? It's no secret. It's no secret right now. The economy is taking a beating as a result of COVID and everything that's involved in that. So you obviously want to keep a lid on operational costs as best you can. Okay, and then last, but certainly not least, it is that Microsoft 365 Insight is going to help you improve SLA attainment. Now, while the other two benefits would be of the most interest to IT engineers and IT leaders respectively, right, the most direct recipient of this benefit is going to be your IT operations and your NOC staff, right? The important thing to note here is that there's a single dashboard that shows the status of a 365 tenant. Now, you could get that from the Service Health dashboard. However, what a NOC operator can't get from that kind of view is how everything is tied together, right? What are the service, system, and application dependencies throughout your entire infrastructure, right? I mean, what routers are connected to what switches that run everything that's responsible for making everything work, right? How are all those variables related to a given outage, right? Now, if all that information is available in a single integrated tool, then problem isolation is quicker, tickets get routed to the proper teams faster, and as a result, MTTR times would decrease, right? So it logically follows then that SLA is going to be met or exceeded. Okay, so let's dig into some of the specifics of the module and how it addresses the challenges I just covered a second ago. And we're going to start with locally sourced service response times. Now, given the challenge of not getting end-to-end visibility, the way Insight addresses that problem is by running locally sourced service response time checks, right, to each of the services in the Microsoft Productivity Suite. Now, when these checks are run from your on-premises or Netreo cloud deployment, right, it effectively mimics, cloud's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to mimic what your users will experience if they're attempting to access these same services because they're sitting on the same network. Now, right, that begs the question, what if my users don't sit on the same network as my entire deployment, like Netreo Cloud, or right, maybe people are distributed because everyone's been working from home, right? So along with the small handful of other improvements to the initial release back in July, the biggest enhancements to Rev 2, what we're calling it internally, right, is the integration of low footprint agent technology to allow probes to be installed on any workstation, right? Those workstations then also make checks to the 365 Productivity Suite, and those response times then are aggregated into your main dashboard. So on the main dashboard page, you'll see an overview of the status for that service in terms of availability and response time, but then you also have the ability to drill in and take a look at the monitoring history as well from a geographic perspective.
Hey, Andy, I'm going to step in here real quick. It actually looks like we have a question. So what desktop operating systems are supported for the agent? Mac OS?
Good question, and no. At present, we currently support Red Hat 7, right? The latest versions of OpenSUSE and Ubuntu, and then any 64-bit capable version of Windows. No versions of Mac OS yet. I personally, right, I would find some utility in that. I happen to be a Mac user, and I've messed around with it, but we don't have anything that's officially supported. So there is a feature request open for it, and I'm messing around with that personally. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a Mac OS agent supported in the fairly near term.
Awesome, thanks, Andy. We actually have another question here. So a customer wants to know what's the monitor and check interval on these response time checks?
Okay, so in these response times checks, right, the intervals are like any other pulled interval within Netreo. So they're run on a 5-minute basis, right, and then the histograms, which we'll look at in a little bit here, right, the histograms then are subject to the same roll-up scheme, right? So you're going to check every 5 minutes. You're going to have 90 days of historical 5-minute data. That's then going to roll up to 6 months of 30-minute averaged data, right? And then after that, after 6 months of that 30-minute data, it's going to roll up again, and you're going to have 3 years of 4-hour samples.
Awesome, thanks, Andy.
Yep. All right. So the next feature is the next feature in the add-on ability to quickly and easily look at resource utilization from a license perspective. Right now, monitoring your storage. Monitoring your storage and licensing usage, right, that's going to allow you to right size your service contracts and tightly control operating expenses, right? Perhaps another way to frame this challenge, right, and the Netreo solution is to ask the question, are you getting your money's worth, right? I mean, I recently ran into a situation in the somewhat recent past, I guess at this point isn't that recent because 365 has been out for about 6 months now, but I was talking to an IT director and I was working, and this director made a comment. They said they were in the process of transitioning over to Microsoft Teams from Slack for their collaboration tool, and he was having trouble getting a beat on how many people had started using it, and Teams versus Slack, right? And at the time, I didn't have a suggestion, right? This is before the 365 Insight module existed, right? This director's only alternative was to either muddle through setup of a Power BI dashboard, right? Or find somebody to make the necessary calls to the Microsoft Graph API, right? Now, luckily, answers to that question, right, are now at your fingertips. And we have since deployed this for the customer in question, right? So not only do they have visibility of the rest of their into the rest of their infrastructure, they're also now getting full visibility into 365 as well. Now, I've labeled the next feature here intuitive UI and familiar functionality. And it might sound silly to claim this is a feature in a software add-on that we release, but remember what the specific obstacle is that we're trying to tackle here, right? Integration into your existing monitoring tool set, and to avoid having to hop from one console to another, especially when troubleshooting an outage, right? When it's all hands on deck, people are running around. You want things to be as simple as possible. Now, when including this add-on in your Netreo deployment, you'll be able to take advantage of all the quote-unquote plumbing, right, that's already present in the other parts of the Netreo solution for other monitored variables, right? So any alarms that are generated from 365 Insight are subject to processing through the incident management engine. You'll have the ability to set not only static thresholds, but then look for anomalous behavior as well. And of course, any variables that we track, they're also eligible for top talkers inclusion, right? So therefore, you can run ad hoc reports or create custom reports for automatic delivery.
Hey there, Andy. Another question just came in. So it says, I currently take advantage of your canned time and state reports for submission to my managers. Is that capability available for Microsoft 365 Insight? It wasn't in the last version.
Another very good question. Yes, it is. So one of the things, right, when we deal with releasing products and get it in the hands of customers, it's super important, right, to be attentive to customers' needs, right? So in addition to the remote agent technology, which represents the biggest enhancement to this version, this feature is one of the little things that we added in terms of improvements. And we will walk through the demo in a few minutes here. We can point some of those other changes out as well.
All right, awesome.
All right, so then the last feature that's included with 365 Insight, right, are the synthetic email and web response checks, and that addresses the potential problem of not getting real service availability, right? Now, checks like this, these allow you to quantify performance and identify hidden service problems. Now, remember that tools like Power BI and the Microsoft Service Health Dashboard, those are only displaying problems from Microsoft's perspective and from within their infrastructure. They don't know anything about your environment, right? So by adding checks like this, you're getting that end-to-end view of how things are really performing. Now, folks listening in right, that are familiar with Netreo already know that we've had the ability to do synthetic email and web checks for quite some time, right? And this is actually the same technology. There's no difference here. The big difference is that we've taken those chunks of code, right, and then also included them into the Insight add-on dashboard, right? Again, the overall idea is that we want to make sure everything to the best of our ability is in a single page, so you're not clicking all over the place, going crazy, looking for information, again, especially when there's an outage going on and time is of the essence. Okay, so rather than just to continue to talk your ears off, right, on how great the software is, let me bring in Alex here. Alex is the CTO for Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions. Netreo has been partnered with Whitlock for quite a while now. And they've amassed a bunch of experience over the last little bit here, getting 365 deployed, and they'll continue to do so right now that Rev 2 has been released with these features.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
So as Andy mentioned, I'm Alex Ulbrich. I'm the CTO for Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions. And we help IT organizations improve visibility, control cost and complexity, transform IT and mature IT departments into IT service brokers. So let's see if we can get you here to share. And I will show you what we're doing. Kyle, would you allow me to share a screen, please?
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
Yeah. All right. So while Kyle's doing that, we're going to look at the some of the problem definition, but we're going to dig into this a little bit deeper. And we're going
Okay.
to jump.
Alex, I just gave you sharing permission.
I appreciate that. Okay. I think I jumped ahead a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and keep going here. So when we go into an engagement with customers, we typically have a standard methodology, and we'll look at this in a little bit. It's called value first, and you'll see in a second how Microsoft 365 Insight fits well into what that's doing. And the first prong of that methodology is called goals and objectives. And if we focus on that, it's going to be really like problem definition. So we want to be clear about what the goals and objectives are. In this case, we needed consolidated visibility into Microsoft 365 to rapidly assess performance and outages and to visualize the resource utilization. And so the manual way to do that is to kind of look at these admin screens. And some of you have probably seen these before. And you might start with service health because we see some colored icons there. And so we have to start looking at advisories for impacted services. But in order to get real details, we have to drill into each of these and look at Exchange. Okay, well, that's not really related to a service that we use. So let's go back and look at a different one. And maybe it might be Teams. And we can see admins can't view up to 20% of call records. Well, that's not really super impactful to our users. And if we want to look at, say, for example, SharePoint, we can come down and look at the SharePoint piece because in our environment, different administrators handle the different sections. And so we would have to kind of ask different people to get at this information. And we log into the SharePoint Admin Center, and we can see some site usage. We can see some file activities. And let's look at the Teams if we need to go back and see that. All right, so we're waiting here. As you can see, we're doing a lot of clicking around to find things. And in order to see, we can see kind of a user activity, but really what we need is a usage report. So we'll select a report, and we'll pick one here, just that might be common. This is actually a pretty good report. So we can see, utilization in terms of active users and, some active channels and things along those lines. Still not super helpful around performance. In fact, we haven't seen very helpful, many helpful reports around performance at all. So let me see here. So what we're looking at is to really kind of showing or demonstrating how there's this complexity in looking at all the different data sources that you would need to try to get some analysis or some utilization data. And when you have a segmented team that, maybe you have SharePoint admins or Exchange admins or Active Directory admins that are responsible for different areas, it's a challenge to get all that information together. So we have this idea of the value first, which I kind of mentioned, and it's a methodology that we've developed over decades of experience that addresses the issues that we face in implementing new technology solutions, specifically not mapping out goals and objectives to the required capabilities, and then mapping specific consumer personas. So meaning like really what's the goal or objective, and then back into the technology solution versus the build it and they will come type of methodology that a lot of us are used to. So when we get to the solution part, which is the technical answer to the capabilities, we need to be able to see Microsoft 365 in a single pane. We need to be able to monitor response time from a user perspective, and we want it to be in the context of our rest of our infrastructure monitoring. And so to that end, we would use the Netreo Microsoft 365 Insight. And this is what that interface looks like. And you've seen Andy demonstrate a couple of the screenshots of that. But to go back and look at the same things that we looked at in here, we can select SharePoint, for example. And let's see here. We love demos. Yeah, there we go. Come on. Let's do it. Well, let me see if it might be me. Okay. There we go. So when we look at SharePoint, this is the response time that simulates an actual user versus even at the best case scenario, what Microsoft believes it might look like. And this is a lot more useful for us to troubleshoot problems. We can look at the storage data here. We can also look at active users versus inactive users. So in this case, we can see that SharePoint is not actively used by our organization. Now, if we looked at Teams, as we did in the admin center, we'll get similar data.
And you know, Alex, something I think that's interesting, if you look at that histogram there, and this is coming from my sys-admin background, you see how it goes kind of, I don't want to say quiet. There's a one little line between, what is that, 3:30 and 9 o'clock last night.
Yeah.
This is running on our lab system, and I happened to notice last night when I was preparing for this, data isn't loading. And sure enough, I log in, and my system that I'm using to simulate these agents, right, freaked out. So I had to catch that, right? So what that orange line there represents is the core system doing its response time, because your core systems are never supposed to go down, but your agents, right, they're going to come and go because they typically are going to be run on desktop systems.
Yep. Thanks for that. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how we use this to troubleshoot issues. And then for the Exchange piece, when we look at that, we actually get to see, in addition to the response times and the synthetic, the users logging in and logging out, we get to see that synthetic email check that Andy mentioned a few minutes ago, and see all the different pieces of that transaction that really help us to troubleshoot and report on what the service, what we're looking at in terms of service level agreements that we have for timings. So this is kind of for us, first of all, it's in the context of the overall, monitoring and infrastructure capability. So we don't have to go to a bunch of places. I don't have to ask different admin. I don't have to go to the Exchange admin and ask him for these kind of metrics. If I need to go to, see something about Teams, I can click on a status icon and get this next piece of data around what the actual problem is, what the timestamps are. It's kind of an all-inclusive, it's just enough to do what I need to do, and it's not too much. So it's not as cumbersome as having to configure Power BI or any other kind of customization or complex permissions. It's all very consolidated and together. So with that, Kyle, would it be okay to go back to the slides for a second?
Yep. I will take back presenter mode here.
Thank you.
All right, just double checking you guys can see my slides now.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yep. So go ahead, Alex.
Okay, so we did jump ahead a little bit, but we'll back up here. And this is the value first piece that I was talking about briefly. And it really goes from left to right. So we identify goals and objectives. We work through the capabilities, which really talks to the kind of technical requirements. And then we make sure that you have valid consumers, people that will actually use the services that you're providing. And then at the end, we have a kind of a cyclic process to review the value that's being obtained from that solution. So, Kyle, would you go to the next slide, please? All right, thank you. Finally, to help all of you realize the incredible savings and benefits that we're getting from Microsoft 365 Insight, we are offering a 30-30-30 offer to you all that includes first of all, a presentation and demo of the whole Netreo suite, a value first planning session, and we'll pick a topic that's of value to you, and we'll help you work through the whole process, and then the installation and configuration of the Microsoft 365 Insight, so that you can immediately see how quickly it is, and we can actually do it in 30 minutes, which is pretty awesome. So if you're interested, please contact sales@whitlockis.com, and we'll get that 90-minute clock started. Thank you.
All right. As far as what the future holds, right, for the 365 module, right, there's actually three different tracks here, right? At least from from this point where we're planning on taking things, right? So the first is the ability to build out scaling capabilities into the agents, and that's going to take a couple of different forms, right? This is not only the ability to mass scale agents, right? Because agents are effectively represented as devices in Netreo, so we want to make sure that can be done quickly, right? But then also the ability to push agents out to VPN connected laptops and workstations, right? Because the overall idea with what we're trying to solve with this module, right, not only the information aggregation, right, that's involved and making it easier to use, right, but how do we genuinely make this easier to use, right? Wouldn't it be cool if we could just click a button? You don't have to mess with RMM software. You don't have to mess with any of those other moving parts. Just get the agent pushed out, and you're ready to rock and roll. And that's going to be a big deal when we talk about large 365 tenants, right? With many thousands of users, with agents that you might want to track. Now, in terms of other few stuff that we're thinking in the roadmap, integration and information about Azure Active Directory status. Right now, AD still isn't technically part of the Office Productivity Suite, and that's the reason it wasn't included in our initial release. And we decided to go in a digital experience management direction for Rev 2. But I'm guessing a lot of larger organizations do take advantage of Exchange Online, right, or hosted OneDrive, for example, right? They also you also want to make sure that your hosted AD components are functional as well. We're still working out the details here of what that entails, right? But visibility is likely going to get into the behavior of Azure AD Connect and its associated components. Now, I think something that's worth noting here, right? And this is probably more for the folks listening that aren't familiar with Netreo, the Netreo solution, right? Netreo can already get AD stats, right? We can already get hybrid infrastructure health metrics. But because we're meant to be a full stack, we are a full stack visibility solution. Now, what's missing here, though, and the reason this is high on our list of feature things, right? What's missing here and will be dealt with in future releases, right, is the ability to get all of that stuff, quote unquote stuff, integrated into the 365 dashboard, right? Get everything at your fingertips, one click, make it simple. Because as we saw with Alex just a second ago, yeah, all the data's there. This is good stuff, but you got to click all over the place, right? Wouldn't it be cool if this is all in a single dashboard, right at your fingertips, make it easy to use? So in the meantime, right, before we do get that next release and that next feature set pushed out, if anyone listening does have questions, I would highly recommend hitting our knowledge base or reaching out to our support and operations team, and they can point you in the right direction as far as getting that visibility now. And then the last thing that I like to put this on every future slide, right? There are always things that we can add, and quite honestly, my job is dependent upon listening to customer feedback, for enhancements like this, or if anyone has any other suggestions. And this webinar is geared towards 365, but what are the things in your environments are causing pain, right? What do you not have visibility to? What would make your life easier? Questions, getting answers to questions like this is what drives our PM team, myself and my teammates, as far as what we end up integrating into the software. So if anyone is interested in having a conversation or wants to share some of those thoughts, always willing to listen. So let me actually take that wraps up all of the material that I had planned, but let me take a second here and open things up for some questions.
Yeah, Andy, so it actually looks like we have a couple of questions here. So the first, and this is an interesting one, can I deploy the Netreo agent into a service engine?
Ah, interesting. Okay, so right, let me how to explain this. So what you can think of a service engine for quick and dirty purposes. Think of it as a UI-less Netreo server. So I'll use that as the backdrop, right? So at this point, the quote-unquote official answer to this question is no, right? It's definitely an interesting topic and something that myself and our developers and operations teams have also debated, right? Of course, the use case here is being able to get overall 365 response to an entire branch office, right? Rather than relying on individual workstations. Now, the reality is that service engines and agents were designed to perform they were designed to perform specific jobs, but it turns out there's some overlap there, right? I can tell you that this is a capability I'm in favor of because it helps scale horizontally the Netreo solution overall. But at this point, we're still in the debate stage on whether or not that feature gets added and whether or not it does actually become a feature is an open question, right? We haven't quite decided yet.
Okay. So Andy, we have another question from the audience here. So does Netreo do any change tracking on 365? And in parentheses it says permission, add, remove users or permissions?
So the module itself does not. If you have stuff like that written going to, audit logs is the wrong word, but event logging and things like that, Netreo does act as a logging listener. So you can actually forward log messages like that into Netreo, and they would then be integrated up into the UI. You can then, count messages that come through. You can get those in reports. And actually, that's an interesting segue to, I talked about a second ago of getting the AD stuff integrated. Right now, all of that stuff is in Netreo, right? So you could go into reports and logging and trapping and look at your reports, but it's not integrated into the 365 module screens itself. But I do like the idea of getting that integrated as well, and something we're certainly going to consider.
Great question.
All right. Okay, so we'd like to also take this opportunity since we have a captive audience to make some announcements, right? So the first announcement we're going to talk about here is what we're calling the ASAP program, right? Now, by now, many of you have heard about the recent SolarWinds compromise, right? And some of you, quite honestly, may still be dealing with the fallout. Now, with our accelerated SolarWinds alternative program, right? We'll replace SolarWinds with Netreo for less than you're currently paying for your annual maintenance or subscription, and we'll get you back up and running, get your infrastructure back up and running in 5 days, and we'll provide free implementation and training. Now, the next announcement then is for non-SolarWinds users. We're also offering a Netreo competitive swap out program. Right, so basically show us your most recent invoice or quote from your existing vendor, and we'll beat their price, and then we'll also implement Netreo at no cost to you, right? Better monitoring, more value, lower cost. And additionally, if you meet with a member of the Netreo team and do go through a full demo of the Netreo platform, we'll send you a $50 Amazon gift card, which isn't a bad return for your time now that we're that Christmas season is upon us. Right, and then last but not least, right, is if you sign up for Netreo Essentials, a 15-day trial before December 31st, and monitor 5 or more resources, we'll send you a $20 gift card. And and then if you like what you see, you can use code Ultimate50 to get 50% off year 1 of Netreo Essentials. And then just really quickly here. For the folks listening that aren't currently customers, we wanted to give you some quick insight into who Netreo is. We're a comprehensive IT monitoring and management solution, right? Netreo we've got a 20-year track record of success with global brands that have trusted us to help them get visibility into all of their IT resources. And over that time span, I'm particularly proud of this. I started in the support organization with Netreo. Over that time span, right, we've achieved a 98% customer retention rate. We just recently became the highest rated vendor on Gartner Peer Insights with a minimum of 10 reviews, and 100% willingness to recommend from our customers. So, before I wrap up, let me take one more opportunity here to answer some questions you may have.
Yeah, and Andy, while we wait for those questions to roll in, I'm actually going to pop up a poll here. So please feel free to answer with as many options as you see fit. And I've also in the chat window, so for the ASAP program, the Netreo swap out program, as well as the Netreo free trial, if you take a look down in the chat there, I've included a few links so you can request more information from us there or go ahead and start that free trial. Additionally, right around 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. Everybody who has attended the webinar, you will receive an email from us with a link to the recording of the webinar. Please feel free to share that with your peers. See if they might find that interesting. And you'll also have some other links. You can also request demos for the swap out and ASAP programs, start your free trials, and all of that. So I'm looking at the questions here. Lots of thank yous rolling in. So Alex, Andy, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
As always, it's a pleasure. Love doing webinars with you guys. Let's see. Some more thanks. Awesome. So I'm going to leave this open for just a little bit more. Alex, anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up today?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and hope that some of this information was useful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Andy, anything from you?
Nothing comes to mind immediately. But again, as I mentioned, and I like to emphasize this because, getting things into the software that's important to our customers is huge. If anyone does have any direct questions, please feel free to find us, and we can talk.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're right at about time here. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I know we're headed into the holidays and the new year, so happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.